And that's the exact same reason that in 2009 I cashed out my IRA. In 2009, I had an IRA worth $600,000, and I cashed it out. I was 39 years old then, and with three children, and that was a big decision to have to pay a $60,000 penalty and $250,000 in taxes. I did it for one reason. For the same type of environment we see right now. In '08, there was, towards into '09, there was a fear of people running on the money markets, and the money markets started to turn upside down. And so there was a law that was, or a bill rather, that was.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance and Reluctant Preppers. We have a returning guest. Andy Schectman is the CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals Investments. Andy, thanks for joining us this Sunday, June 14, 2020.
Good to be back, Don, again. Good to see you again.
We keep meeting over Skype and talking about how the world around us is changing faster than anybody could ever have believed. We were just talking about how if you went back a year in your mind and do a thought experiment and say you're sitting around with some friends over a beer talking about the way the world might go a year ago, would anybody have believed that we'd have gone through the things we've gone through in the past year? Would they have said, no way, you're way off, thinking things maybe 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe, but not next year. And here we are, we've been through it, and we don't know what lies ahead. We have no idea what the next quarter or two or three will bring. So any thoughts to you, from you, about these turbulent times that we're living in?
It's very interesting being in Minneapolis, Don, again, the epicenter of insanity just a few weeks ago. All of a sudden it's back to just calm. Other than the burned down buildings and the plywood, the facade in front of so many of the damaged and looted establishments, you couldn't tell anything happened. Minnesota has always been a great place to live and to raise a family. There's a saying, Minnesota nice. And it was very surreal to be the epicenter of the craziness, to drive through Lake Street in Hennepin and to see the remnants of a burned down police station and post office and grocery stores and malls and what have you. It was very surreal, but it just as quickly as it came, it disappeared, which is even more surreal. I guess people hope springs eternal, so to speak, but the remnants of it is all that lasts, and it thankfully is certainly more back to normal, so to speak, in terms of people getting out and not being afraid to walk downtown Minneapolis or uptown where all the craziness was just a couple of weeks ago.
Well, you made me think of two things. One, we have a question from a viewer already, Sobra Nimak, who asks, Andy, how is it to live and work in Minnesota these days? Cheers from Mickey in Melbourne. So that's a faraway question coming in. But so working environment, there's layers of things here, right? There's the lockdown that was preceding any of this other civil unrest, and then you've had the civil unrest on top of that. So is work life returning to any semblance of normal where you are?
I think so many people are just deciding to work from home. And so I don't know if we'll ever go back to normal. What is normal? What is the new normal? I'm not sure that we can quantify that, but I think that when you look around you, normal is changing, at least in terms of people's realization that they don't need to be in an office any longer. And when we talk about, restaurants as an example, I don't know how the hospitality industry and the restaurants that really to me is the one part about normal that I miss. I don't know how restaurants go back to a new normal working under 30 or 50% occupancy and 6 feet separation. And, what is new normal? We're starting to go back to at least, people aren't afraid right now, I guess. And people were very concerned. I had people calling me asking if they could borrow one of my handguns 2 weeks ago. And, there was genuine concern when living out in the suburbs, the local police stations were calling everyone or sending out texts saying, stay indoors. There's rumors of this being brought out to the suburbs. There was a great deal of fear and concern that is dissipated, luckily. But I guess it's also concerning that as quickly as it came and as quickly as it disappeared, does that mean it can quickly come back? And I think that's something as we head into the fall and the confluence of events that are all happening, not to mention all of these handouts from the CARES program and the PPP and all of the money that the Fed has given out. These all start to expire here in July, and then you have the election, and you have all of these things happening in conjunction with the reopening of the economy. Are we going to see more of it? I'm not quite sure. So I don't know if there is a new normal or if we're heading back to normal. We're just, I think, getting by every day and certainly hopeful and optimistic, but cautiously so at that, I think.
Another thing you made me think of when you said that there's this drastic crisis that was suddenly put upon you, and then as seemingly as fast as it came, it left, and then it's almost like, did it actually come and leave? Because the people of Minnesota, the people who remain, by and large, the 90+% of the people are who you talked about. They're the Minnesota Knights. They're the people who always help each other out during snowstorms, and they always they always are a community. They care about each other, that kind of thing. So that's still there. That's the bedrock. That's the actual people. So what came and went, a lot of people have had a concern that it wasn't necessarily grassroots and it wasn't necessarily representative of the actual people of each area where that trouble was brewing. The other thing that you made me think of when you talked about it has gone for now, things seem to be coming back to a semblance of normal, is as rapidly as we lost all of those civil liberties and normalcies of life, has anything changed to make our liberties more secure, or has it been just the opposite? That in fact now the skids are greased, the policies are in place, and now we've had our dress rehearsal. The next thing could be a lot faster and a lot more severe if it happens.
That's what I'm most concerned about. Yeah, I think that it's a dress rehearsal of sorts, and the skids have been greased. You're right, and I think it will be a whole lot easier to accept being shoved back into a hole the second time than it would be the first for a lot of people. And yeah, I that's what I guess I'm most concerned about, because I don't think we are out of the woods yet by any stretch of the imagination, at least in terms of economically, we're not out of the woods by any stretch of the imagination. And as we get closer and closer to the election into the fall, I expect things to get crazy again. And I'm not even trying to begin to contemplate what crazy means, but I definitely do think that we will see an uprising of sorts leading into the election. It would be unfathomable for me to believe that it'll be smooth sailing heading into an election that is a very high stakes election. So.
And the economic backdrop for that high stakes election includes this increased financial separation between the classes, because what people have been gone through because of this huge unemployment, many businesses closing, clearly evident that trillions of dollars went to the banks and all this sort of thing, and the ordinary people and the mom and pop shops just got crumbs, if anything. So I think a lot of those stresses are greater than ever. Agreeing with you.
No question about it. And that separation is growing by the day. And you can see, I mean, it's a bailing out of Wall Street. It's a bailing out of the big banks, because, that just helps people feel calm that Wall Street hasn't collapsed yet. And so I think that'll continue. That'll continue until it doesn't, until there's just an absolute revolt against it. And it should have happened in 2008. The banks should have been left to fend off Mother Nature's revenge, and instead it was papered over. And now the result, when this does correct, is going to be a whole lot worse. It'll be a much greater depression than I think people really are bargaining for. So yeah, that's why I think that we're far from out of the woods yet, and it's somewhat of a sweet spot now. It's a calm. It's the time that has lagged since the first drop down, the 35% fall down in the market in March. That time lag to where we are now in June has dissipated the fear and has accentuated the hope and the optimism. And with that, I think there's a little bit of a sweet spot right now where, people ought to realize that we're not too far removed from complete and total chaos. And this is an opportunity to protect themselves, to get some gold and some silver, to pare down their exposure to a stock market that has crawled back and given back, some of the losses. So I think that this is a very interesting time right now, and I have never been more on pins and needles as to what's coming next over the next few months, especially as all of these programs, these subsidy programs, start to wear off, and then what? Then what happens, and what comes next? So interesting times, as the Chinese curse says, no question about it.
Speaking of all that civil unrest, people have been worried about the infringements on our civil liberties, and liberties and freedoms of many kind have been at risk during this, or actually taken away during this lockdown, that still haven't been fully restored, and people are concerned that might happen again and at greater extent. Wanted to mention that we'll be attending Freedom Fest 2020 in Las Vegas, July 13th through 16th, and just found out Miles Franklin is going to be there, and I will be there, Dunnigan Kaiser, so be able to meet folks if they attend Freedom Fest. And we're going to have a link available in the description of this video so you can meet us there, and we'd love to look for you there. So Andy, thanks for sponsoring a booth at Freedom Fest.
Absolutely. We're excited to be there, excited to have you represent us there, and it's certainly an interesting time to be getting the libertarian perspective, no question about it.
Yeah, last time we were in Vegas, we actually enjoyed some hiking in the Red Rock Canyon and some horseback riding there, which isn't too far away from there. And even in the heart of the Strip, like the Flamingo Hotel has this 15-acre nature park, like right in this atrium area. That's really amazing. So there are, for those who want to experience some natural beauty there, it's available. And Lake Mead is only about a less than an hour drive away, so that's pretty remarkable as well. So hope to see people there.
Just be nice to get out and experience a little bit of normal life again. So absolutely glad to be there, glad to be part of it, and definitely want people to stop by the booth and say hi.
Sounds like if you were a betting man, you wouldn't take the bet that the second half of 2020 is going to be smooth sailing and calm.
No, quite to the contrary. I have told my operations department to go on to our line of credit and load up as much as we can in supply. When you look at what happened in the beginning of the year, you had 65% of all the silver mines closed, over 50% of all the gold mines closed, all the refineries that were on the border between Italy and Switzerland were closed, with massive demand in the first two quarters, really the first quarter and a half. We're setting up for, I believe, major supply disruptions into the fall. Now, you throw in increased demand, you throw in market problems, you throw in an election, you throw in perhaps a second wave of COVID. All of these things that are coming together towards the end of the year, to me, it's a perfect storm waiting to happen. And so I have told my operations to go onto our line of credit to get as much as we possibly can and to be very well stocked up into the fall. Mm-hmm. And like I was saying to you before, I owe Chris Martinson a debt of gratitude. That's why we've been able to stay ahead of things the whole time, because he was talking about this in December and January, gave us the opportunity to get ahead of it, to deal with the Perth Mint, to start buying forward supply into April, May, and June. And I'm doing the same thing here. I'm getting ahead of it. I think that indeed this is one of those opportunities where we'll look back on it and it'll seem so clear and so obvious. This is, I think, one of those turning points right now where you got to get your house in order leading into the fall. Everyone's excited to get back out into the sun and to socialize and to be part of the economy again. I understand that. But by the same token, I think that's ignoring what's right here in front of us. And March and February was maybe a dry run for what's coming next. And I hope I'm wrong. And again, if I'm wrong, you prepared for not. But if it's anything like it was in March, my biggest concern was staying in business, because product was flying out the door so fast that everything came with a 6 or 8 week delivery delay on it at some point. So we want to get ahead of it. We want to be prepared. And I think that people who take the time to do that will certainly be able to sleep a lot easier as things get more interesting into the fall.
We've got some questions from viewers that were submitted ahead of this interview. It's a wide range of questions, but they're learning that you've got some background in this industry and they want to pick your brain on a number of topics. So with your permission, I'd like to dive into some of those. We've got one here from Buran Garuso who says, explain to the listeners how much labor in terms of energy or human labor hours is needed to produce a single ounce of silver. Most people do not understand the real value of silver and how much energy or labor is needed from planning, drilling, refining to get to the final product.
Well, you certainly have to dig a lot deeper and go a lot further and spend a lot more money because silver is found in nature in a form called epithermal. It's found very close to the surface. And so the big deposits were found many, many years ago. And so in terms of dedicated silver mines, which are fewer and fewer and fewer of them, they do have to dig deeper and go further and spend more money and spend more energy to get to the end product. So I don't know what the exact number is, but I will say that a lot more than it used to be. And certainly, 70% of all the silver that is mined nowadays comes as a byproduct of mining other metals. So just in terms of actual silver, dedicated silver mines, they're fewer and further in between. And with a 90+1 ratio, that's just completely out of whack. The ratio should be somewhere closer to 12 or 15-1 right now, and indicative of how difficult it is to actually pull the metal out of the ground. Keith Neumeyer, who runs First Majestic Silver publicly, is saying it's 7 or 8-1 that's coming out of the ground. And so, you're talking about traditionally it was 15.5-1. In terms of the geologic relationship. And over the last 150 years, it's been about 42-1. What's really coming out of the ground is 8 or 9-1. Bottom line is that you have to spend a whole lot more. And to look at it at a 90+1 ratio is the buying opportunity of a generation, period, 100%. These are anomalies in price that, have only happened a few times in human history. So I'm not exactly sure how much, but simply to say, a lot more than it ever was, and it's continuing to be such as the low-lying fruit has been picked, and the easy stuff has been picked long ago. So you have to dig further, spend more money, and explore a whole lot more than you ever had to. So it's a good question, but one that I think is only going to become more and more and more costly as time goes on.
Related question on silver. Rick Todd asks, I understand silver is undervalued. However, what about platinum? It is much rarer than gold. It appears that it's greatly undervalued compared to gold.
Very much so. And in fact, it's the same argument between silver and gold. In fact, it might even be every bit as much or more undervalued. I can remember 2008 or 9 when gold was just over $800 and platinum was over 2,000, nearly 3 times the cost. Most of my career, it's always been $50, $100 more. Over the last 50 years, it's been $50 to $100 more always, and many times much more than that. Platinum is an industrial metal primarily used in catalytics and in catalytics in diesel engines. The ratio, the mathematics, the logic definitely makes sense. I guess my only inclination is that it doesn't have the history as a monetary metal the way that silver does. If I'm building a hot fudge sundae, gold and silver bullion are my vanilla ice cream. Having some sprinkles or some cherries or some hot fudge, there's your platinum, there's your numismatics. But I wouldn't rely on platinum as my vanilla ice cream because it doesn't have the monetary history. But the value of it is screaming. It's the exact same thing as the silver to gold ratio. The value, the mathematics, the logic behind the question is very, very sound. I'm just not as convinced. Furthermore, the mints who make it have pretty much been the model of inefficiency. And they make very, very, very few ounces. The U.S. mint, the Australian mint, the Canadian mint, if they're making more than 25 or 30,000 ounces a year, I'd eat my hat. It's going to be somewhere in that neighborhood each. Very, very small in comparison to 1.2, 1.3 million gold eagles that they make. It's a tiny, tiny, minuscule percentage. And as a result, the premiums are high, which kind of takes away a little of the incentive because you're paying $100 premiums basically to buy an ounce of platinum. But in the end, yes, the logic, the mathematics, the ratio, definitely Does it play out that way because of the industrial versus the monetary side? Not sure, but for me, it represents a much smaller part of my pie. Maybe 5 or 10% of my metals would be in platinum because it is a really good value. Just I'm not convinced that it plays out as a life raft of sorts the way that gold and silver would.
I remember talking to when we had Rick Rule on about a month and a half ago. He was talking about the platinum being used, as you mentioned, in catalytic converters and so on, but that because it had gotten so costly over about a decade ago, that there was a lot of re-engineering that happened to get so they could use palladium instead. And now palladium's blown up.
And the same thing happened. Now they ought to move the same thing back. I remember that. And when that happened, Ford Motor Company took a huge position in the palladium futures market and shot palladium up to $1,200. Because it was originally platinum was the catalytic metal for unleaded and for diesel. And then when it did get too expensive and palladium was a third of the price of platinum, here again, here's a good ratio between platinum and palladium. And normally palladium, you could get 3 ounces of palladium for 1 ounce of platinum. Now you flip-flop them around and it's, you can see that platinum is certainly undervalued and arguably palladium is overvalued. And you're right. This is exactly the environment in reverse where the auto manufacturers ought to re-engineer their machineries for making catalytic converters and put platinum back in. It would be much more economical. And some people think that'll happen. And there's your incentive. Here again, to me, gold and silver are wealth, money. Platinum is an investment. And although it has a lot of the same principles, wealth preservation, what have you, to me, when I think of gold and silver, I think of wealth. When I think of platinum, I think of an investment.
We have a question about that, following up on something you've talked briefly on here, but if you could hit on the second part of this at least. Bo Kane says, how are your supplies of precious metals compared to your last visit, and what is the percentage of individuals selling back to you versus your last visit? Still just a handful?
Nobody sells to us. Nobody. It's the darndest thing.
I know we've had a few, but it's very few.
A few, but like less than 0.5% or less than that. I mean, it's very, very small. And I've always said, the gold bull market is like none other because it's characterized by fear. And the higher the price goes or the scarier the world only tightens people's grip upon it. And so there's been very, very, very little in buyback. I have gone out on a limb in terms of supply. I have emptied all of my savings. I have gone out on a line of credit limb to buy as much as I possibly can, a physical product to offer to people heading into the fall. We are fairly well stocked in silver. We have silver eagles, over 20,000. We have a whole bunch of 1 ounce silver bars. We have silver maple leafs. We have Britannias. We have kangaroos. We have gold eagles and buffaloes and gold bars and gold maples and junk silver and platinum. We have loaded up, and I will continue to do so until I have no more money to buy this stuff, because I do believe you have to be in front of this if what I think is coming is coming. And I do think it's coming. I don't know what it looks like, but I do think that getting product will be a defining function or factor of this market. I guess for many years I've spoken on one central theme, and that is that the market will be defined in two ways. It'll be defined by people on the outside as, darn it, I missed it, it's too expensive. And I think you'll see that. You'll see gold fly through $2,000 at some point like a hot knife through butter and won't come back. And people will think, dang, I missed it. I should have. I've been thinking about it. I don't know why I did. It's too expensive now. But the people who listen to this show, and again, who have a position already in gold and silver, who want to increase that position, well, they'll be slightly upset that they didn't get more when they had the opportunity.
Yeah.
But what their main way of looking at this market, the main way it'll be identified will be by inability to source product easily. That premiums will be too expensive, that delivery delays will be abound. It's a very small market. It's a tiny market. Represents such a tiny fraction of all the money that's out there. And one trend that I have noticed since February is an expansion of the choir. The choir is not just the gold bug anymore. All of a sudden, as I've said on your show before, we're deep into the audience. We're getting demand and inquiries from people who have never owned precious metals before, ever. And so when you have this expansion of interest, and at a time when there's been so much money flooded into the markets, you have an expansion of interest with a whole lot more money with a fragile and fractured and fragmented supply chain. In other words, what is inflation? More and more money chasing fewer and fewer goods. That's exactly where we're heading into. Price inflation in this industry, that's what we've seen. I think heading into the fall, people will look at this market as one that is increasingly difficult to get product and very quickly could just be impossible to get product. And that's why we've gone to great lengths to secure it heading into the fall, because what we saw in March was a snapshot, I think, of what we will see if there's some event, again, whatever that event may be. So we're pretty well stocked up for it right now.
Something you just said, the reason I was smiling there was because you mentioned the expansion of the mind share into the population. If you look at our channel, it's been around since 2013, Reluctant Preppers, the demographics, if you look at by band, by decade of age, with almost nobody in the 20 to 30 crowd, and then more in the 30s, and more in their 40s, and more in their 50s, and lots in their 60s. It's like almost doubling every decade. The interest in concern in what's coming in the future, really people with showing real concern about awareness and preparedness, mindedness, was in later age stage, later career stage. I just had a fellow call me this week. I couldn't tell by his voice. When I asked him, he was purchasing metals for the first time. He said, yeah, I'm a first-time metals buyer. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, my dad's been listening to your show for some time. He said, really, I should talk to you. I said, so what's your age? He said, well, I'm buying this with graduation money. He just graduated from college. He's 22 years old. I thought, wow, that's really remarkable, because that shows...
That's amazing.
Isn't that remarkable? And
it is.
And on the flip side, we've got people. Now, this next question is about people who've traditionally had confidence in the money in their banking system. Victory CSA says, with reserve requirements for U.S. banks now at zero, why would anyone hold their wealth in the banking system? Does this act of desperation by the Federal Reserve and the Trump administration does it not signal that the days of the U.S. dollar as world reserve currency is rapidly coming to an end and the worldwide monetary reset may soon arrive?
Well, I've been thinking that for a very long time. And every time I'm on your show, I talk about the Tier 1 reclassification of gold. Why would they have done that last April? If it not to be significantly involved in something, and I think it'll be a new monetary system that will be pegged to gold. And I think, quite frankly, as E.B. Tucker said on your show the other day, big deposits of cash in banks are sitting targets. They're sitting ducks, waiting for bail-ins that were enacted the last time the market collapsed. Those laws were put into place. Bail-ins are now legal, and big deposits of money in these bankrupt banks with no reserve requirements are sitting duck. And that's the exact same reason that in 2009 I cashed out my IRA. In 2009 I had an IRA worth $600,000, and I cashed it out. I was 39 years old then, and with 3 children, and that was a big decision to have to pay a $60,000 penalty and $250,000 in taxes. I did it for one reason. For the same type of environment we see right now. In 2008, there was, towards into 2009, there was a fear of people running on the money markets, and the money markets started to turn upside down. And so there was a law that was, or a bill rather, that was proposed. It made it to the House floor. And the bill basically said, let's take IRAs, nationalize them, and put them into treasuries, kind of like an annuity. Now, that never made it. It was vetoed. But the minute that genie was let out of the bottle, I said, I'm out. And I cashed out my IRA. I paid the taxes. I paid the penalty because I felt indeed that was a sitting duck, just like the deposits are now in the banks that are sitting duck. They changed the laws. They made it possible to take it, and it will go into a nationalized program. It will be our patriotic duty to support the Treasury market that will be collapsing. And so, yeah, I think that's exactly what could happen. And to leave your money into the bank while you're getting nothing in the way of return, and these banks are broke, bankrupt, insolvent, and now the Fed is allowing them to remove the only bit of prudence that they had in terms of reserve requirements, it's a fool's errand. So, yeah, I think we're at in baseball terminology, it's the ninth inning, at least in terms, I think, of the dollar. and its role in as a world reserve currency. It will be challenged. It won't be the only one, but I think it will be challenged or usurped, maybe by our own government, maybe by another. But I think the mismanagement of the dollar and what the commercial banks are doing and the central banks are doing is just indicative of that. Yes, we're getting very close to the end, very, very close. And I wouldn't leave any more than a couple months worth of bills in the bank. I wouldn't even think twice.
This about the strength of the bank is also asked by veteran Joe, who says, Andy, Jim Sinclair stated that if we had not had the pandemic at the exact moment we did, that the euro-dollar market would have blown up like the repo market in the States, causing a cascading central bank failure starting in Europe. Given that we are teetering on a central bank failure, are there any signs that you are looking for, then this gets back to your business, that Miles Franklin might have to implement plans to halt sales or take any other emergency actions as a business?
Now, the only thing that I could see that could really affect our business would be a collapsing of the COMEX market, and certainly what we saw in April with people standing for delivery and the problems between London and COMEX certainly signal, at least perhaps the possibility of problems with COMEX. But if COMEX were to blow up, yes, it would be a problem because that's how all of our business is hedged. We're able to hedge all of our sales on either side, buy or sell, which allows us to be market neutral. And if something were to happen with the COMEX and we couldn't hedge our sales and our purchases, it would be a cash business where we'd have to have front wire first. Once we have wire, we can lock in the order. Otherwise, you'd be wide open to too much risk that could quickly in one day put you out of business. So I guess the biggest issue as far as a precious metals company is concerned is less the banking industry and more the commodity exchange, which enables us to offset our risk or to remain market neutral. That happens, that blows up, yeah, it'll be a whole different landscape. It would just be front wire, cash only, or cleared funds and then order placed. Short of that, there'd be too much risk to make it work.
I can certainly see why the COMEX mechanism of being able to hedge orders is necessary, but it does seem like even in your description there where you talked about bank-wired funds implies a functioning banking system so we can, that is, and a currency that's stable enough that it has meaning during that time. So
even with Bitcoin, the only reason we're able to use Bitcoin to take it for precious metals is because we can hedge it. And you can't take something for payment that by the time you turn your computer off has either gone up tremendously or gone down tremendously. You have to be able to hedge it. And so once it became hedgeable on the COMEX, we started taking it as a form of payment for precious metals. And so you close the ability or disrupt the ability to hedge, all bets are off. Now it's just straight up, cash for product. Anything short of that would be far too risky for anyone to stay in business for any period of time.
Looking forward to a time when there has been a major evidence of appreciation or a recognition, I guess, by a bigger and bigger part of the audience that silver and gold are a safe haven where they're appreciating compared to a lot of other less sound assets. Human is asking, when it comes to potentially selling silver and gold to reputable dealers like yourself, is it better for the seller and or the dealer to own precious metals that come from sovereign mints like the Royal Canadian Mint, the Perth Mint, the U.S. Mint, as opposed to, say, private mints, Metal or Sunshine Mint, Beaver Bullion, and so on?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is, not detrimentally. I often use the analogy, you're having a gigantic party. You're having family reunion and hundreds of people are coming and you're in charge of buying the soda. So you go to Costco and you need 500 cans of soda and you can buy Coca-Cola or you can buy Kirkland and save 65 cents a can. And that's substantial on 500 cans. You're talking almost $400 or whatever it is, $300. So you decide maybe I'll get half and half. I'll buy half Kirkland, half Coca-Cola, and I'll take some of that savings and buy something else. Well, in the end, if your guests are thirsty enough, the Kirkland brand is just fine. But I think if they had their druthers, they'd probably reach for the Coca-Cola. by the end of the evening, I would guess that the Coca-Cola was probably dented more than the Kirkland brand in terms of the volume that was taken anyway. My point is this: it drinks the same if you're thirsty enough. But in general, the demand for government issued coins is far, far greater than it is for private issue. And that's why it costs a little bit more than it does for the generic brand. But here again, if I had to choose generic over nothing, I would certainly choose generic. But if I were going to choose myself, typically I would say buy from the US, Canadian, or Australian mint, and you'll never have issues with liquidity or getting the highest possible bid price on the back end either. I guess let me just simply say this. In this industry, Dunnigan, there's a fine line between penny wise and pound foolish. Don't step too far over the pound foolish line. You can have the greatest thing in the world, but if it lacks liquidity, it's not so great. So I would rather err on the side of demand and liquidity, because that's really what precious metals are about. You don't want to have to haggle with someone when you need it for something. And that's what I look at precious metals as. I look at it as wealth. And if I don't need to use it, I'm darn glad I have. Or if I do need to use it, I'm darn glad I have it. And if not, I give it to my children. So, but when that time comes, that opportunity or that emergency, you don't want to be put in a position of weakness. So getting things that are sought after, that's usually your best choice.
This is a question that comes up every time and every month and over the years. So if we could just put some perspective on this, and others, guys, when you comment back on this video, you can add your thoughts to this to answer this question as well. Without Excuse 2011 asks, how do you rationalize selling gold and silver in times when you are telling everyone that very soon gold and silver prices will shoot to the moon? Do you believe what you preach? So that question has been presented in like a dozen different ways over the past years. People saying, if precious metals are so valuable, then why are the dealers selling them? Why don't they just hold on to them? And other people have kind of pointed out.
I want to scream when I hear that question most of the time. To even try to defend it, I almost belittles intelligence. And let me start by simply saying this. When I started in this industry, I was 19 years old. I'll be 50 this summer. My father told me there'll be one rule and only one rule, or he would fire me. I said, I can deal with that. I can deal with one rule when we start the company together. What's the one rule? He says, you'll buy something every 2 weeks or I'll fire you. Now, I own the company. I'm 51% owner and president, and he will not fire me any longer. He's still my partner. But I've honored that promise to him. And for 30 years, every 2 weeks, I have never missed a 2-week period in 30 years, not once. Over 1,000 transactions. I've never missed a 2-week period. To me, it's wealth. It's money. I accumulate it every 2 weeks, but I also own a company that sells it. And so, show me anyone who believes in anything that owns a company that buys up all of their inventory and goes out of business. That's just not the way that it works. I buy it, I own it, I believe in it, and I'm enthusiastic about it. But those questions of why would they sell it if they believe in it so much? Well, I don't even know how to answer that other than to say it's my business, and I believe in it so much that I'm enthusiastically talking to people about it on a Sunday afternoon. In Minneapolis, when it's 75 degrees and sunny out, I'm sitting in here talking with you about this because I believe in it strongly. And I think it is a life raft, and it is wealth that is immutable, that's been unencumbered for 6,000 years. And I hope I never need to use it. And if I do, I know I can rest assured that when my children use it, or when their children, or when my great-great-great-grandchildren use it in the year 3000, it'll still have wealth and it'll still have meaning. And as long as I'm able to continue to accumulate it and offer it for sale as a businessman, hey, that's great. That's great by me. But it's my business, and that's why I sell it. And I feel like I'm doing good by people and helping.
That's the thing that made me think of just now, especially with the Minnesota metaphor. Or you're living there, and we used to live there and enjoyed fishing on the lakes and that sort of thing. There's a lot of people in Minnesota who make their living, and rightly so, being fishing guides. They are very expert. They are subject matter experts and exquisitely, they can win fishing contests when they enter them, whatever. But they love it for the intrinsic value of it. But there's also that saying, teach a man to fish and he may never go hungry again. They believe that in passing on that skill and that wisdom. So they allow people to hire them to teach others how to do the same. It isn't just, so you ask one of these fishing guides, why do you teach others to fish? Why don't you just catch all the fish and keep them for yourself? It's like, that's what it makes me think of. Is like, that doesn't make a lot of sense if you believe in it.
I'd also like to remind the person who submitted that question that we started doing this in 1989 when I could hear the crickets chirping at noon. And when if we would do $14,000 in profit a month, that was all we needed to stay in business. And, now we have to do almost 20 times that to stay in business. So the point of it is that back when we started this company, no one wanted gold and silver. And, I wasn't asked that question then. No one asked their stockbroker that. And so point of it is simply that we've been here for a long time, for 30 years. We've done it the right way. We've had strong fingertips. We've hung on. We've never had a customer complaint because we believe in what we do and we believe in what we say. And just because we follow our own logic, do as we say, we're not hypocritical by any means. People seem to think that we are trying to pull the wool over their eyes. Couldn't be anything further from the truth. Actually, we're at face value. You know me well enough now to know, Dunnigan, I believe in it, and I also believe in helping people, just like you do. And that's why you have spent so much time since 2013 on YouTube, and helping people. And what goes around comes around in life. I'm a big believer in that. And so, yes, I believe in gold very, very much. Yes, I buy it every 2 weeks. Absolutely. And I'm still able to offer it to sell to other people and do things that way. So until that happens, we'll continue doing it and feel good about it. Absolutely.
I guess that's the whole thing. We should really bring this home from a preparedness standpoint, how we help each other in the whole arena of being reluctant preppers. It isn't just about everybody just taking care of number one. You want to get the word out. That's why I'm sitting here. I'm trying to get the message out. I have been since 2013. My son got me, fired up about concerns about things, and that's why I'm bothering to do this as well. So as a preparedness-minded individual, by right, we are connected. We have a responsibility in a sense to our neighbors, to our family members. We try to reach out and try to encourage, to share information, to share awareness, and if possible, to help lead people to say, hey, here's you could get this. I think this is the best storage food, or I think this is a really good flashlight, or I think this is a heater that might keep you warm if the power goes out or whatever. And some people have a role of just sharing information. Some people have a role of going, well, I'm going to get what I need for myself, but I'm going to also help maybe become a dealer on this because I believe in it. So it's a way of expanding the circle of people whose lives you have touched and who can also be prepared like you are.
Well, it's a little maddening, we when we talk to people about this in normal times, we're doom and gloomers, and then when we try to talk to them about it when it's important, well, why would they be, selling the stuff that they're telling us to accumulate? It's a maddening deal, but the bottom line is that's why I associate with people like you, quality people whose motivation should be very clear. Look, I've done this for 30 years. I'm not perfect. I'm a human. I mess up. But in 30 years, we've never had a customer complaint, ever. And your listeners won't be the first. I'll make sure of that. But the point of it is that you can't be full of malarkey and be in business for 30 years without a complaint. And we're very passionate about what we do. We try to help best we can, and I hope people take it at face value. As far as reaching us, we can be reached at milesfranklin.com is our website where we do publish a newsletter 2-3 days a week. I can be reached at Andy at Miles Franklin. And as I've made a mention for your listeners, anyone that mentions reluctant preppers or liberty and finance in the subject line, we'll make sure that we offer them the best price in the industry and the best service with accountability and accessibility. Where we're heading, I think accessibility is really very important, and again, and accountability. And those are two things that we excel at. And well, that's why we love working with you and being associated with you. And in terms of integrity, you're at the top of the list of anyone I know in this industry. And so that's the best we can do. We can be accessible, we can be accountable, and we can have integrity. And those are things that we excel at. Send us an email, Andy at Miles Franklin, and give us an opportunity, myself, to answer your questions. I will, within 24 hours, reply back and make sure your listeners get their questions answered promptly, get the best prices when they want it, and be able to talk to someone, most importantly, when they need to.
Well, Andy, thank you for taking the time on your weekend to join us so that we can get this out for Monday, and reaching out to all of our subscribers and our viewers who are not yet subscribers. If you're not yet a subscriber, click the subscribe button and the little bell so you get notified of because we publish every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern. Andy Schectman, CEO of Miles Franklin Precious Metals Investments, thanks for joining us here again on Reluctant Preppers and Liberty in Finance.
Thanks, Don. Again, you take care of yourself. I hope to see you again soon.
If you've decided that now is the right time for you to protect your family's financial future by acquiring physical precious metals, gold and silver, I'm delighted to let you know that I have now become a licensed dealer's representative for Miles Franklin, one of the oldest and most trusted names in bullion dealerships. And we can provide you with physical delivery to your personal possession or to professional vault storage or precious metals IRAs. Just email me at libertyandfinance@protonmail.com, and please include your name and phone number in your email to libertyandfinance@protonmail.com. We'll get right back with you and find out how to best meet your needs so that you can either begin or increase your acquisition of physical precious metals now and protect your family's future starting today.